Brit. The pack broke her bone by bone, until the ruthless Alpha claimed this broken Omega. The wind howled through the snow-laden valley like a living thing. Brit. Ancient trees bent under the weight of ice, their branches scratching at the dark sky. Among the silent shadows, a small figure moved with careful steps. Brit. Her name was Alara, and even in the freezing cold she carried the scars of a life lived in fear. Her arms were thin, her legs bruised, and her hands bore the marks of many struggles, yet her eyes, gray and unyielding, held a spark that refused to die. Brit. Alara had been taken by the pack when she was only a child. The wolves, humans with the strength, speed, and instincts of beasts, had ruled the valley for generations. Brit. Under the curse that bound them, the pack thrived on order and fear. They were merciless, punishing weakness wherever they found it. And to the pack, Alara was weakness itself, a fragile Omega who had no name beyond the whispers they used to torment her. Every day she endured more pain than any person should. Brit. Every night, the wind carried the cries of others who had broken before her. Yet, in her heart, she kept a secret, a small, defiant hope that one day she would survive. Brit. She had no illusions about freedom. Escape seemed impossible. Still, she dreamed quietly of a life beyond the pack, where her bones would not ache and her spirit would not tremble. Brit. The Alpha, Kale, watched from the shadows. His presence was a shadow itself, a figure of power and danger. Brit. He was the ruler of the pack, the one whose word was law, whose anger could crush even the strongest warrior.
Yet, he did not join in the torment that others inflicted on Alara.
Brit, he observed, silent and distant, his piercing eyes never leaving her. There was something about her, something that drew him, though he could not understand it. She was broken, yes, but there was a strength in the way she endured, a spark that the others could not see. Brit. The pack cornered Alara near the frozen river that cut through the valley. Wolves snarled and circled, their shadows flickering against the snow. Brit. Her arms were pulled roughly behind her. Her knees scraped raw as she fell to the ice. Every member of the pack took a turn, pushing, striking, laughing. Brit. Her body shook from pain, but even as her strength faltered, she did not give them the satisfaction of a scream. Kale stepped forward, his boots crunching in the snow, and silence fell instantly. Brit. Even the wind seemed to pause in respect or fear. He was tall, broader than any man she had ever seen, with dark hair falling over sharp eyes that glinted like steel. Brit. There was a coldness in him, a ruthless quality that made the blood in her veins chill. Yet at the same time there was a strange calmness in his gaze, a certainty that he alone had the power to stop this. Brit. Enough! He said, his voice low and steady. The pack immediately scattered, retreating into the shadows. Brit. Alara collapsed onto the ice, shivering, her body trembling from pain and cold. Kale approached her slowly, his eyes never leaving her face.
Brit. You will not break, he said quietly, kneeling beside her. Not unless I allow it. Alara looked at him, disbelief mixing with fear.
Brit. Who was he to say that? He was the Alpha, yes, but he was cruel, and the others had already shown no mercy. Why not? She whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. Brit. Kale's expression did not soften, but his eyes betrayed a strange depth. Because you are different, he said. Brit. The words were almost a secret, spoken to her alone. And I do not fear what you might become. She did not understand. Brit. How could someone like him, someone so powerful and terrifying, see anything in her but weakness? Yet she felt something stir inside, a mixture of curiosity, fear, and an emotion she could not name. Brit. She looked at him, and for the first time in years she did not feel completely alone. Night fell swiftly in the valley. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the dim light of the moon reflecting on the snow. Cale led her to a small cave on the side of a cliff, hidden from the rest of the pack. Brit. Inside it was warmer, though the fire he lit only cast flickering shadows across the walls. The scent of pine smoke and the faint tang of iron hung in the air. Brit. Alara curled into herself, exhausted, but her mind was alive, buzzing with questions.
"You are safe here," Cale said, his tone firm.
Brit. No one will touch you. Not tonight. Elara's chest rose and fell rapidly. Brit. Safe? Could anyone truly be safe among these wolves? Brit. Yet as she looked into his eyes, she sensed that he meant it. And in that moment, a tiny part of her dared to hope. Brit. Cale did not leave her alone in the cave. He remained near the entrance, silent but vigilant. Brit. Occasionally he would glance at her, his sharp eyes softening ever so slightly when she shivered or coughed from the cold. She noticed these small gestures, and though she would never admit it, they mattered more to her than she could explain. The first night in his presence was not comfortable. She slept fitfully, waking to strange noises outside and the sharp sense of eyes watching from the darkness. Brit. But even in her fear, she felt a small seed of trust grow. She realized that Cale was different from the others. Brit. He did not revel in pain or cruelty. He was still terrifying, still merciless in his authority. But there was a line he would not cross. Brit. Over the following days, Cale began a strange routine. He allowed her to eat before the pack, let her rest while others trained or hunted. Brit. He did not speak much, but his presence was constant. The other wolves watched with suspicion. Brit. Some resented the attention he gave her. Others whispered that it was a mistake. Yet Cale ignored them all. Brit. He had his reasons, and he alone would decide her fate. Elara noticed the way he moved, calculated, graceful, and dangerous. Brit. Every gesture was precise, every word measured. He was a predator, yes, but one who had learned control, one who understood the power of restraint. Brit. And though she did not want to admit it, there were moments when she felt drawn to him, as if the same bond that tied him to the pack also touched her in some inexplicable way. One evening, the moon rose full and bright, casting a silver glow over the frozen valley. Brit. Cale stood at the cave entrance, watching the shadows shift in the forest.
Alara approached him cautiously.
Brit. Why do you help me? She asked softly, her voice trembling.
Ale did not turn to her immediately. He studied the horizon, his jaw tight, the muscles in his arms flexing as he clenched his fists.
Brit. Finally, he spoke. Because you are not like the others, he said, his tone almost a whisper. Brit. And because I will not let the pack destroy something that has the power to survive. Elara did not understand the meaning of his words, but she felt their weight deep inside her. Something had shifted. Brit. The fear that had always clung to her began to loosen, replaced by a mixture of hope and confusion. She did not know what the future held, but for the first time she felt that maybe survival was possible, not just in body, but in spirit. Brit. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant howl of a lone wolf. Then Cale turned to her, his eyes sharp yet strangely tender. Brit. You belong to me now, he said, and there was no malice in his voice. Only certainty. Not because I own you, Bray, but because I see what you can become.
Elara swallowed hard, her heart racing.
Brit. She wanted to protest, to run, to demand freedom. But something inside her, something raw and fragile, told her that she could not. That she wanted, somehow,
to understand him, to survive with him. Breath. The wind outside howled louder, carrying the scent of snow and the distant cries of the pack. Elora's body shook, not entirely from cold. Brit. She looked up at Cale, and though fear still lingered in her chest, there was also a flicker of something new, something dangerous, yet compelling. For the first time, she did not feel completely broken. Brit. And as the night deepened, Cale remained at her side, a silent guardian in a world that had tried to destroy her. Outside, the forest whispered of curses and shadows, of pain and danger yet to come. But inside that small cave, a fragile spark of hope burned in the heart of a broken Omega. And it was that spark, small, trembling, and defiant, that would begin a story neither the pack nor the cursed valley could ever forget. Brit. The frost lay thick over the valley, and the wind carried a bitter chill that cut through even the heaviest of furs. Inside the cave, the fire Cale had lit flickered against the stone walls, casting long shadows that danced like silent watchers. Brit. Elara huddled close to its warmth, but the memory of the pack's cruelty clung to her like a second skin. Even now her body ached with bruises, and her mind could not forget the harsh laughter, the sharp pushes, the fear she had endured. Brit. Cale sat across from her, tall and unyielding, his eyes scanning the darkness outside as if he could see every movement of the wolves lurking beyond the trees. He did not speak at first. Brit. His silence was not empty, it was weighty, filled with meaning that Elara could not yet understand. She watched him, careful not to move too quickly, afraid she might awaken the predator she felt in every controlled motion of his body. Brit, you need to eat, he said finally, his voice low and commanding. You will not last if your strength fails before you even begin to fight for yourself. Elara hesitated. Brit. She was used to being punished, to being denied the simplest of comforts. Brit. But hunger gnawed at her stomach, and the warmth of the fire promised a temporary reprieve from the cold that had settled in her bones. Slowly she took the food he offered, her fingers trembling as she accepted it. Brit. Cale's eyes did not leave her face, but he did not press further. There was patience in him, a rare and unfamiliar kind of patience that confused her as much as it reassured her. Brit. As she ate, her thoughts drifted to the pack outside. Even with Cale's intervention, they still waited, still whispered, still circled like wolves smelling fear. Brit. She had survived because he had stopped them, but she knew this was only temporary. The pack's cruelty was a force of the valley itself, as natural and unyielding as the ice and snow. Brit.
And yet, within this small cave, she felt something she had not felt in years, a small, fragile sense of safety. Cale stood and approached the fire, stretching his long legs and letting the heat wash over him.
Brit. There was a tension in his movements, a restrained power that seemed ready to spring at any moment. Elara studied him carefully. Brit. He was dangerous, yes, but he was also careful, precise. Every action he took seemed measured, controlled. Brit. He was a predator, but one who had learned the strength and restraint. You are not like the others, he said, almost to himself. Brit Disk. Then, louder, he added, and I will teach you to survive, to use what the pack has tried to destroy. Elara's eyes widened. Teach me, she whispered. Brit. No one had ever said such a thing to her. No one had ever suggested that she could be more than broken. Brit. I do not know how. Brit. Cale's gaze sharpened. You will learn. You must. Brit. If you do not, the pack will consume you. And worse, his voice dropped to a near whisper. The curse will consume us all. Brit. Elara frowned. She did not understand what he meant. Brit. The pack? The curse? Brit. What force could bind them so tightly, so cruelly, that even Cale, fearsome, untouchable Cale, spoke of it with caution? Long ago, Kale continued, this valley was cursed, Brit. A power twisted the wolves who lived here, shaping them into hunters with cruelty in their hearts. The curse feeds on fear, pain, and broken souls. Brit, it grows stronger with each act of suffering.
Elara's stomach tightened. You mean...
Brit, all of it. All they do. It makes the curse stronger? Kale nodded. Yes, Brit. And that is why you are important. You survived where others could not, Brit. There is a spark within you, a light that the curse cannot touch if it is protected, if it is guided, Brit.
The words were strange to her ears. Important?
Brit, a light? After years of feeling like nothing but a target, a weakling, she did not know how to accept such things. Brit, yet deep inside a flicker of hope began to burn. A hope that she might not be lost entirely. That she might one day be more than the pack's broken Omega. Days passed, and Kale began to train her, Brit. Not with violence, but with discipline and careful instruction. He taught her to move quietly through the forest, to sense the wind and the snow, to hear the smallest snap of a branch beneath the feet of predators, Brit added. Every lesson tested her body and her mind, but he never pushed her past the point of breaking. Slowly she learned, Brit. Slowly she began to feel strength returning to her limbs, confidence returning to her heart. Yet even as she grew stronger, the emotional tension between them deepened. Brit. Kale was stern, commanding, and terrifyingly powerful, but there were moments when his cold mask slipped. When he thought no one was watching, he would glance at her with something unspoken, something dangerous and compelling. Brit. Elara felt the pull of it, though she fought to ignore it. She had learned that attachments were dangerous.
They could be exploited,
Brit.
They could be used to hurt you more than any physical blow. But Kale's presence was unavoidable.
Brit. He watched her as she trained, as she ate, as she slept. Brit. And in return, she could not stop herself from noticing the small details. The way his jaw tightened when he was thinking, the slight relaxation of his shoulders when he believed no one was watching, the rare softness in his eyes when he glanced at her. Brit. One evening, as the snow fell heavier than usual, Elara wandered to the edge of the frozen river. The ice glimmered under the moonlight, and the forest was silent, except for the whisper of wind and the occasional snap of a distant branch. Brit. She felt restless, trapped within the cave walls, yearning for freedom she did not yet understand. Kale appeared beside her silently, as if he had emerged from the shadows themselves. Brit. The pack is restless tonight, he said. They sense change. Brit. They sense you.
Elara looked at him. Change?
Brit. Me! Yes, he said, his voice low and dangerous. You are not the broken Omega they believe you to be. Brit.
You are stronger, and they know it. That is why they will not rest until they break you, or until I claim you.
Brit. Elara swallowed hard. The words were chilling, but they carried a strange thrill. Brit. Claim her. She did not understand. Brit. And yet she felt drawn to him, though fear and caution warred within her. She wanted to resist. Brit desperate. She wanted to run, but the thought of leaving the cave, leaving Kale, even for freedom, felt like stepping into a storm she could not survive. Brit. The next days brought more training, but also moments of quiet connection. Kale allowed her to rest, to eat, to recover from injuries that were inevitable during practice. Brit. And each time he did, she realized that his actions were deliberate, a balance of control and care. He was teaching her not just to survive, but to understand her own strength. But the shadows of the curse lingered. Strange omens began to appear, desperate. Shadows in the forest seemed to move with a mind of their own. The howls of distant wolves carried voices she could almost understand, whispers that spoke of pain and power intertwined. Elara felt a chill of foreboding. The curse was real, and it was awakening. One night, as the moon rose full and bright over the frozen valley, Kale and Elara stood together at the cave's mouth, watching the snow swirl around the trees. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "you will face them. Not to fight, but to show them that you are no longer theirs to break." Elara's heart raced. The pack, the same wolves who had tormented her, who had taken everything from her, would watch her. She felt fear rise like ice in her veins. And yet, under that fear, a flame of determination sparked. Perhaps, she thought, this was the moment she could reclaim herself. Kale's gaze softened, though only slightly.
"Do not fear them," he said. "Fear will only strengthen the curse. Stand tall, and it may weaken. Remember this. I am with you."
Always. Elara nodded, though she did not fully understand the weight of his words. Always. That single word carried both comfort and danger. She knew Kale's claim over her was absolute, yet it was not cruelty he offered. It was a strange, commanding protection.
And though she could not admit it aloud, a part of her wanted to trust him.
As the night deepened, the wind howled across the valley, carrying the cries of distant wolves. The snowflakes fell silently over the frozen river, sparkling like shards of light in the darkness. Elara shivered, not entirely from cold, and looked at Kale with uncertain eyes. "Do you, think I can survive?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kale's eyes met hers, sharp and commanding. "You will survive," he said, "because I will not allow you to be broken." Desperate test.
"And because the curse will test you, but it will not win. Not if you are willing to fight."
Elara's chest rose and fell rapidly. "Fight!"
That word felt foreign, yet exhilarating. For the first time in years, she felt that maybe she was not just a victim.
Maybe she could be something more. The wind howled louder, carrying the distant cries of the pack, and Elara clenched her fists, feeling both fear and anticipation.
She did not yet know what the next day would bring. She did not yet understand the full power of the curse or the dangers waiting beyond the cave. But one thing was certain. With Kale by her side, she would face it. And as the snow fell heavier around them, Kale's dark eyes fixed on the forest beyond, he whispered to himself, a promise and a warning both. The pack will see her rise, and they will tremble.
The valley was quieter than usual.
But snow covered the trees in thick white blankets, and the river lay frozen under a silver glaze. Yet even in the stillness, the curse that haunted the pack stirred. Its presence was subtle but unmistakable. A chill in the wind, a whisper in the shadows, a feeling that the very air watched and judged every movement.
Elara had changed.
The Omega who had trembled at the touch of the pack's cruelty was no longer that frightened girl. Her body had grown stronger under Kale's careful guidance, and her mind had sharpened, learning the rhythms of the forest and the ways of survival. Her heart remained cautious. Fear and hope lived side by side, a fragile balance that she struggled to maintain. Kale watched her quietly as she practiced moving silently among the trees. Each step she took was careful and precise, her eyes scanning the forest, listening to every sound. Brit. He saw the determination in her, the flicker of defiance that had never fully left her. And though he did not often show it, he felt a surge of pride, Brit. She was learning, evolving, becoming more than anyone had ever expected. But the curse was awakening faster than he had anticipated, Brit. It had been dormant for decades, feeding subtly on the fear of the pack, growing stronger with each act of cruelty. Now it sensed a shift. Brit. Alara's growing strength was a threat, a spark that could either break or save them all. One night, as the moon hung low and full in the sky, a strange wind swept through the forest. Brit. Shadows shifted unnaturally, twisting around the trunks of trees as if alive. Elara felt it first, a cold touch on her skin, a whisper in her mind that carried both warning and promise. Brit. She froze, her breath visible in the icy air, and instinctively glanced toward Cale. He was watching her, as always, but there was a tension in his posture she had not seen before. Brit. His eyes, dark and commanding, narrowed as he scanned the surrounding trees. "It is here," he said quietly. "Brit, the curse, it stirs." Alara's stomach tightened. "What will it do?" she asked, her voice trembling. Brit. Cale's jaw clenched. "It will test us." Brit. "Test you. It will try to turn the pack against you, to break you once more." Brit. "But if you survive, if you embrace your strength, it can be undone." Brit.
Elara shivered at the thought. To be tested by the curse was to face every fear she had carried for years magnified 1,000 times.
Brit. Yet within her, a spark of courage began to burn. She had survived so much already. She could survive this too. The next day, Cale took her deeper into the forest than ever before. Brit. The trees grew taller, their branches darker, and the snow was thicker underfoot. "Today," Cale said, "you will confront the pack in the shadows." Brit. "Not to fight them with your body alone, but to show that you are no longer theirs to break." Elara's heart pounded. Brit. The thought of facing the pack, the same wolves who had tortured her for years, made her stomach twist with fear. But she nodded, trusting Cale's judgment. Brit. If anyone could guide her through this, it was him. Brit. As they approached the clearing where the pack gathered, whispers rose in the wind. Wolves watched from the edges, their eyes glinting with suspicion and curiosity.
Brit. Cale positioned himself beside Alara, his presence a shield of strength. "Remember," he said quietly, "they will try to provoke you."
Brit, do not respond with fear. Respond with calm. Brit, respond with control. Elara took a deep breath, feeling the cold bite of the air in her lungs, and stepped forward. Brit. The pack's eyes followed her every movement, but she held her head high, moving with the precision Cale had taught her. She felt the energy of the curse surrounding them, a heavy weight pressing against her mind, trying to twist doubt and fear into powerlessness. Brit. A growl rose from the pack, low and threatening. One of the wolves stepped forward, a tall, broad-shouldered warrior whose eyes burned with hatred. Brit. He lunged toward her, expecting panic, but Elara did not flinch. Brit. She moved with grace, sidestepping his advance, and held her ground. The pack watched in stunned silence. Brit. Elara's strength was undeniable. Her movements were precise, controlled, and confident. Brit. For the first time, they saw her not as a broken Omega, but as someone who could survive their cruelty, someone who might even challenge their dominance. Cale's eyes never left her. Brit. He saw the fear in the pack begin to falter, replaced by respect and something else, a flicker of caution. The curse roared in the background, sensing the shift in balance, whispering threats that only Elara could hear. but she blocked them out, focusing on her breathing, her movements, her presence. After hours of careful display, the pack finally dispersed, retreating into the shadows with grudging acceptance. Brit. Elara sank to her knees, exhausted, but triumphant. Kale approached, his expression unreadable. Brit, you did well, he said simply. Elara looked up at him, unsure what to feel. Brit, pride, relief. Brit, fear that the challenge was not yet over? Was it?
Ha! 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 Ha!
Brit, enough, she asked.
Kale knelt beside her, placing a firm hand on her shoulder.
Desperate. Enough for now, but the curse, Brit, it will return. And next time, it will be stronger. Brit. Her chest tightened. She had survived this test, but she knew he was right. Brit.
The curse was a living thing, ancient and relentless. It would not be defeated by strength alone.
Brit, it would demand courage, resilience, and a bond that could withstand even the darkest shadows. Over the next weeks, Kale and Elara grew closer, their connection deepening as they faced the challenges of the Cursed Valley together. Brit, Kale taught her not just to survive, but to understand the forest, the pack, and the forces that bound them all. He showed her how to sense the shifts in the wind, to hear the whispers of the snow, to feel the energy of the valley as if it were alive. Brit. Elara began to feel a strange sense of power awakening within her. The fear that had always dominated her life no longer held her in complete submission. Desperate. She could feel the curse testing her, yes, but also pushing her to discover a strength she had never known existed. One evening, as the moon rose full and bright, Kaal led her to the top of a cliff overlooking the valley. But the snow glimmered like silver and the distant forest seemed to hold its breath. "Look at it," he said. "But this is your world now, and soon it will be your choice how you shape it." Brit.
Elara shivered, not entirely from the cold. The responsibility weighed on her, but so did a sense of possibility.
Brit. She could survive. She could rise. Brit. She could claim a place not as a victim, but as someone who mattered. Kale's gaze softened as he watched her. Brit, you are no longer broken, he said quietly. And though the curse will test you again, I will not allow it to destroy you. Brit.
You are mine in the way that matters, and together we will face whatever comes.
Brit. Elara felt a mixture of fear and longing. His words were commanding, yet there was care beneath them. A promise she could not fully understand, but could feel deep in her bones. Brit. She nodded, knowing that the path ahead would be dangerous, that the curse and the pack would continue to challenge her, but also knowing that she would not face it alone. The wind picked up suddenly, carrying a haunting howl from deep within the forest. Brit. Elara turned her head, feeling the familiar shiver of foreboding. The curse was awake now, fully aware of her growing strength and her bond with Kale. Brit.
It would not rest. It would push, pull, and test them both in ways they could not yet imagine.
Brit. Kale placed a hand gently on her back, steadying her against the cold and the fear. Do not fear it, he said. Brit. Fear feeds it. Strength and courage will diminish it. Brit. And together, we are stronger than it knows. Elara's heart raced. Brit. She could feel the weight of the valley, the history of the pack, and the shadow of the curse pressing in from every side. And yet, she also felt a spark of defiance, a fire she had not known existed. Brit. She could survive this. She could endure. Brit. And perhaps, with Kale's guidance, she could even begin to undo the darkness that had claimed so many before her. As the night deepened and the snow swirled around them, Elara knew one thing for certain. The next challenge would come soon, and it would test everything she had learned. The curse would not relent, the pack would not forgive, and the valley itself seemed to hold its breath in anticipation. But Elara would not run. She would not falter. And with Kale by her side, she would face the darkness, even if it threatened to consume them both. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Snow drifted silently over the valley, blanketing the trees and rocks in a soft white glow. But the peace was only an illusion. The curse that had haunted the pack for generations had fully awakened, and its presence was felt in every gust of wind, every shadow that stretched unnaturally across the snow. Elara stood at the edge of the frozen clearing, her gray eyes sharp, her breath visible in the cold air. She had grown stronger than she had ever imagined, both in body and mind. The bruises of her past still marked her, but they no longer defined her. She was no longer the fragile Omega who had trembled at the pack's cruelty. She was someone who had learned to survive, to fight, and, most importantly, to trust herself. Kale stood beside her, a dark silhouette against the pale snow. His presence was commanding, and yet there was a warmth that only Elara could see, a protective edge that tempered his ferocity. He had taught her, guided her, and challenged her. Together they had faced the pack's whispers, the curse's subtle attacks, and the shadows that lurked in every corner of the valley. But now the ultimate test had arrived. From the trees beyond the clearing, the pack emerged, their eyes glinting with fear, suspicion, and a strange recognition. They had seen the change in Elara, had felt the shift in power, and now they hesitated. The curse had whispered its threats, but it had also shown them her strength. Some of the wolves circled cautiously, others stepped back entirely, unsure how to approach the Omega who no longer trembled. Kale's voice broke the tension. "This ends tonight," he said, low and firm.
The curse tests us. It challenges us.
But we decide the outcome. Stand with me and face it without fear. Elara drew a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill her lungs. Fear still lingered, as it should, but it no longer controlled her. She looked at Kale, feeling a surge of courage, and something else, something deeper, an unspoken bond that had grown from shared trials and trust. Together they would face what came next. The curse stirred in the shadows. It was subtle at first, a whispering wind, a rustle of leaves, a sudden drop in temperature. Then it grew stronger, pressing against Elara's mind, trying to twist doubt and fear into weakness. She felt the pull, the weight of centuries of pain and broken souls. But she planted her feet firmly in the snow. She would not yield. She could not. Kyle stepped closer, his hand brushing hers briefly, a touch that sent a shiver down her spine. "Do not let it control you," he said quietly.
Bah. You are stronger than it knows. Elara nodded, her hands clenched into fists, not with fear, but with determination.
She could feel the curse's power, its hunger for brokenness, but she also felt her own strength, the lessons Kale had taught her, and the bond that had formed between them. She would not fail. The pack advanced slowly, circling the clearing. Their eyes were wary, yet curious.
They had never seen the Omega move with such confidence, such command. Even the wolves who had tormented her in the past now paused, sensing that something had shifted irreversibly.
Kale's gaze swept the clearing, taking in the pack, the snow, and the shadows. "Remember," he said to Elara, "control your fear. Control your strength. The curse feeds on imbalance."
He glances around in desperate. Show it we are united.
Brit. She could feel the pack's tension, their hesitation, and she used it. Every step she took was confident, measured, showing that she was no longer prey but a force to be reckoned with. Brit. The curse flared, sensing her defiance, and the wind picked up, swirling snow into a storm around them. Then the first shadow moved. Brit. From the darkness of the forest, a figure appeared, taller than any wolf in the pack, eyes glowing faintly with unnatural light. The curse manifested, testing her in physical form, trying to overwhelm her with fear. Brit.
Alara's heart pounded, but she did not falter.
Brit. She remembered Kale's words. Strength and courage will diminish it. The shadow lunged toward her, a swirling mass of darkness and whispers. Alara stepped to the side, letting the lessons Kale had taught her guide her movements. Brit. She did not attack with anger or fear, but with precision, moving with control and awareness. The shadow hesitated, recoiling from her calm presence, sensing that she was not prey. Brit. Kale joined her, his own movements fluid and commanding. Together they faced the curse, moving as one, their bond evident in every gesture. Brit. The shadows tried to separate them, to twist fear into doubt, but the connection between Omega and Alpha was unbreakable. Where fear rose, courage answered. Brit. Where the curse sought chaos, control prevailed. For hours they danced with the darkness. Brit. The pack watched from the edges, some drawn closer by curiosity, some still fearful. Alara could feel her strength growing with each movement, each act of defiance. The curse, ancient and relentless, began to weaken, recognizing that its hunger for brokenness would not succeed here. Finally, with a final surge of courage, Alara stood tall, her eyes blazing with determination. She extended her hands, not in anger, but in command of the valley itself. The shadow shrieked, twisting and dissolving into the wind as if it had never existed. The curse recoiled, its power diminished, unable to feed on the Omega who had learned to rise above fear. The clearing fell silent. Brit. Snow drifted gently from the trees, and the pack stared in awe. They had witnessed something they had never seen before. The Omega, once fragile and broken, standing alongside the Alpha, commanding not with cruelty, but with strength and courage. Brit.
Kale approached Alara, his expression unreadable at first. Then, slowly, a rare warmth softened his features.
Brit. You have done it, he said quietly. You have faced the curse, and you have endured. Brit. Not just for yourself, but for all of us. Alara felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Brit. Her body ached from the struggle, but her spirit felt stronger than it ever had. She had survived the pack, the curse, and the darkness within herself. Brit. She looked at Kale, understanding finally the depth of his guidance, his care, and his unwavering belief in her. The pack slowly approached, their leader stepping forward. Brit. There was no malice in his eyes now, only respect.
You have changed, he said softly.
Brit. The valley has never seen strength like yours.
Alara nodded, feeling a surge of quiet triumph. She had been broken, yes, but no longer.
Brit. She was whole in ways she had never imagined, and she had learned that true strength was not just physical. It was courage, resilience, and the ability to trust oneself and those who had earned that trust. Desperate.
Kale took her hand gently, lifting it to his lips in a rare gesture of respect and affection. You are mine, he said softly, not as possession, but as partner.
Brit. Together we shape the future of this pack and this valley. Alara smiled faintly, her heart full. Brit. Then let us begin, she said, her voice steady. Let us rise together. The snow swirled around them and the forest seemed to sigh in relief.
as if the valley itself recognized that the darkness had been challenged and that hope had returned. Brit. The pack gathered around, not with fear, but with reverence, ready to follow the Alpha and the Omega who had endured, who had fought, and who had risen stronger than anyone could have imagined. Cale looked out over the valley, his dark eyes scanning the horizon. Brit, the curse is not gone entirely, he said quietly. It sleeps still, and shadows will return. Brit.
But we are ready. Together, we are stronger than any darkness.
Brit. Elara nodded, feeling the truth of his words. She had survived, she had risen, and she had been claimed, not in cruelty, but in partnership, in trust, in strength. Brit. The valley was theirs to protect, to guide, and to heal. As they stood side by side, the moon casting silver light over the snow, a distant howl echoed through the valley. Brit. It was no longer a threat, but a reminder. The world was vast, filled with shadows and trials, but also with courage, love, and the power to endure. Brit. Elara took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill her lungs, and glanced at Cale. We will face it all, she said, and we will rise.
Cale's hand tightened over hers.
Brit. Always, he replied, and together they watched the valley, a symbol of hope, strength, and redemption.
Brit. The curse had tested them, the pack had challenged them, and the shadows had sought to break them. But they had endured. Brit. They had risen, and the valley, once haunted by fear, now pulsed with the promise of new beginnings. Brit. The wind carried another howl, distant but clear, and Elara smiled faintly. She no longer trembled at the sound. Brit. She knew that with Cale by her side, no darkness could ever truly consume her. The snow fell softly, blanketing the valley in white light, and the Alpha and the Omega, once broken and lost, stood together, strong, united, and ready to face whatever shadows the future held.